What's good? What's good? The title of this video is inspired by my desire to maybe someday get a doctorate degree. It would be fun to try to infiltrate the institutions. I already have a master's degree, so one more step. I used to aspire to be in academia, actually. No more, though, because I believe in pseudoscience. So, anyways, the title of this video: Class Granularity as a Tool for Exclusionary Retribution. Kind of inspired by the critical theory ideology that dominates academia, where everything is viewed through the lens of power and oppression. And so, what do I mean by that? Let's unpack that. Class granularity to me is the drilling down of details when applying the intersectional formula of someone's identity to create the largest sense of victimhood. So, for example, comparing a poor white person's struggle to a poor trans black person's struggle. So instead of just talking about poor people's struggles, we begin to granularize. That's a hard word to say, but think of a grain of sand compared to a rock, right? So the level in which we're exploring the details. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about granular class granularity. Now, how is it being used as a tool for exclusionary retribution? Let's give some real life examples. I believe in recent years, legislation has been passed where farmers and people of color, or people of color who want to get into farming or who are in farming, get the first and sometimes only opportunities for various subsidies. And so taxpayer money is being directly funneled to a very, very specific identity group. Black farmers, for example. White farmers are also struggling, but because we need to systemically right the wrongs of our racist country's past, we're engaging in future racism or current racism. Ibram X. Kennedy, a leftist ideologue, influencer, says that it is not enough to just be against racism. You have to be actively anti-racist, and to be actively anti-racist includes engaging in activities that rectify or reconcile the social balance that our country has created. Because I do believe, and this is where it's like frustrating to be me, because I hate leftists, but I actually do agree with them on a lot of things. And so while I do not believe America right now in its present form is systemically racist, I believe it has had systemic racism in its past. And we can't just kind of look back and say, oh, well, we've fixed the laws, everything's okay now, because it's not okay. There are generational trauma issues that compound and are exacerbated by the social engineers. But that's where the conspiracy and pseudoscience stuff comes in. Let me just give this example real quick. I don't know if it was Larry Elder or like Glenn Lowry, or Michael McCorder or John McCorder, excuse me. But I heard one of them tell mention this talking point, and I had heard it before, but when it comes from a black man, it's just like it has more credibility, I guess, especially a black man like with a PhD or something, right? Apparently, during like the second-ish wave of feminism, I think, um, social workers used to go around and tell women, like black women, to not have a man in the house, to not get married, because then they could get more benefits from the state and they could be more free and more independent. And they intentionally targeted the black community. Now, there may not be any writing, and see, this is where like I would love to discuss that with further with people, because it's like that's so hard for me to believe, but at the same time it's not. I do believe that. And to me, that's systemic racism when our social workers are trying to dismantle the family unit of Black Americans. That's like very, very systemically racist, extremely so. Oh my gosh, if that's true. And so I want to talk further with John or Glenn or whoever. I'm sure one of them said it. If not, I did a racist thing, I guess, and attributed something to a random black guy. But anyways, okay. So to wrap up the video, I want to talk about the interesting change in the mainstream narrative that occurred as the Occupy Wall Street narrative or movement was growing. So, man, this was way back 10 plus years ago, Occupy Wall Street. If you're too young to know what that is, you should look into it a little bit, because it was a moment in time where, for my generation, I'm 35, almost 36, so a millennial, it felt like we were pretty united. Like, we were like, yeah, fuck the system, fuck the 1%. Let's tear this bitch down. And it felt good. And then, and the New York Times did like a news story and they showed a graph. And I encourage you to look into this. Around 2012, 2013, the news coverage began to shift from focusing on class struggle to race issues. Before 2012 ish, race was not a predominant theme in the news. It was still in the news, and it should still be in the news. It should still be discussed, but it's almost like an exponential graph of how often it has been included in the news. And some people speculate or theorize that that was an intentional effort to divide, to break up the Occupy Wall Street movement, because black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everybody was on board with that shit. That was actually the reason. This is a confession. My dumbass caucused for Bernie Sanders in Washington State in like 2015 or 16, whenever the caucus was. So in Washington State, there's like a caucus process to select your delegate. It's stupid. I hate all of our fucking processes. But anyways, I was young and dumb. This was like 7 years ago, right? And I was like, at the time in my life was really good back then. I had a great paying job. I had a house. I had a car. I had a motorcycle. I was blessed and I knew it. And that like guilt that I had told me, you know what? Bernie Sanders isn't that bad. I didn't know anything about him really before that moment. I didn't know anything about him. I was just naive and caught up in the moment. But I wanted to be part of the movement, and I wanted to see change. I have wanted to see change my whole life. But then the DNC fucked Bernie Sanders, and it, was proven, and Bernie kind of just took it in the ass, bent over and took it, and then his true character had been revealed, that he's just a fake champagne socialist. Establishment shill. And the veil began to lift, and it's been a wild 7 to 8 years. I've been a libertarian for like 15 to 20 years, right? Like I've always been sovereign minded and freedom oriented. I've seen the value in it. I've appreciated the value in it. It's been something that, like, literally since a teenager, I was reading books on philosophy and sociology and history, anthropology. I've always just been in, extremely interested in like the human experience, not just in the moment, but throughout time. And then also projecting it into the future for like, how can we build towards the future? Buckminster Fuller has been a huge influence on me. I did not ever get to meet him. I'm too young, but I met someone who got to meet him, and that person just like the way that person talked about him, it was so cool. It was like firsthand um, confirmation that he was a cool character. He was a flawed human. We're all flawed humans, but the point is like his desire and ability to like think futuristically was is inspiring to me. And all of that to say, I want to see change in the world. I do. Uh, I hate what these culture wars are doing, because instead of focusing on class and the oppression that we all, or the majority, the 99% of us, are experiencing due to the bureaucratic hell that our fascist administrative state has implemented and is continuing to implement, they divide us, talking about race and gender and all this other nonsense, all while passing laws like worse than the Patriot Act, passing laws like restricting women's right to health care and more strict gun laws. It's while we're fighting, they're continuing to consolidate the power structures. They're continuing to consolidate the resources. During COVID, the middle class took like just a huge chunk of it disappeared and went up. It went to the upper class, the elites, the oligarchs. And this is enabled by the fact that we're fighting the culture wars. The granular, what was the title of it? Something. Um, I'm going to just wrap up the video. What did I? Class granularity as a tool for exclusionary retribution, giving African Americans in San Francisco a UBI. There are poor white people. There are a ton of just poor people in general in San Francisco, but we're going to give a very specific group social benefit that other groups could also benefit from. Class granularity as a tool for social retribution. This is what the Marxists want, you commie bastards. This is partial caricature, but also partially who I really am. I do. Okay, hold on. I got on the video. All right. Thank you. Much love, y'all.